All right, so what we're going to do from here is talk a little bit about Hitler's what's known as Hitler's rearmament. Now, what you have to understand about this is that the Treaty of Versailles, which sort of officially ended World War One, the Treaty of Versailles was signed in 1919. It forbade Germany from really building up a military. And so when we talk about Hitler's rearmament, it's not so much an example of aggression as an example of appeasement, because they just kind of allowed Hitler to go ahead and rearm and allowed Germany to rearm and to start building up their military. Now, the thing is that most historians would agree that the Treaty of Versailles was actually unduly harsh on Germany. And it probably should have been much different. However, the problem with this is that Germany was kind of like a giant, and I had a professor one time explain to me that, or use the analogy of this giant that you tie to a table, and then when you tie him to a table, you start beating him. You kind of give him wet willies, and stuff like that. You start pulling his nose hairs out, and plucking his earlobe and hitting him some more, and you just basically humiliate him. Well, you shouldn't do that, and that's kind of what happened to Germany after World War One. Of course, obviously, Germany was complicit in all the things that happened in World War One, but they alone were not the cause of World War One. And so, sure, they shouldn't have done that. But if you do that, all right, the last thing that you want to do is let the giant up. All right, don't untie the giant and be surprised that he's going to go crazy. And that's kind of what happened here. They said, well, we were too harsh on Germany, so let's let them build back up their military and do what they want to do. So in 1933, the same year that Hitler assumed power, Germany withdrew from an international disarmament conference and from the League of Nations, which it had joined in the 1920s. In March of 1935, and of course you don't have to remember these exact dates, Hitler formally renounced the disarmament provisions that were in the Treaty of Versailles. And he began to construct a new German Air Force, which of course he was not supposed to do. He reinstituted conscription. Conscription is just means the draft, with the obvious intent of establishing a large army. I think that they were limited to about 100,000 people in their army. I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but it was about that. And that was what they were limited to as a result of the Treaty of Versailles, but now they were going to begin to expand. Hitler declared that Germany could not accept the permanent military inferiority that the Allies had imposed on her. Hitler's massive program to rearm Germany increased his popularity not only among nationalists and people that were kind of militaristic, but just the people in general, the German people in general, because it really pulled the nation out of the Depression. You may hear some old people sometimes, and historians as well, talk about how it was not the New Deal that got the United States out of the Great Depression. It was World War II. And then they would be correct, because this massive expenditures from the government, in this case, provided a lot of jobs. And Hitler just did that, earlier in Germany, and it pretty much pulled Germany out of the Depression. So if you ever want to know why people followed Hitler, I mean, there was a lot of reasons. One of the reasons is because in 1933, before he took power, and he basically, I mean, this is something that may surprise you. I mean, he came to power through a democratic process. I mean, Germany basically eventually voted themselves out of a democracy, which is actually possible. It would be very difficult the way our Constitution is set up for us to do that in the United States, but it is possible. And that happened in Germany. And Hitler basically, when he took power, like I said, there was about 50% unemployment in Germany, and within 2 years there was very little unemployment in Germany, and so people kind of looked at him as being a really, very smart guy, almost a genius. Now, what did the League of Nations do to this, blatant disregard to the Treaty of Versailles? You guessed it, they did nothing. In fact, Britain even negotiated a separate naval agreement with Hitler, allowing him to rebuild the German fleet. Now, in 1935, Mussolini invaded Ethiopia. All right. He used a border incident between Ethiopia and Somalia. Somalia was an Italian colony, just as his pretext. And the Italians eventually succeeded in conquering the African nation, though their tanks were nearly defeated by Ethiopian spearmen. Thus began the popular joke that Italian tanks had only 2 forward gears, but had 3 that would go in reverse. In order to placate Western public opinion, the British and French governments persuaded the League of Nations to impose a meaningless arms embargo against Italy. But basically, they pretty much allowed Italy to do what they wanted. In fact, the British fleet even allowed Italian troops and munitions to pass through the Suez Canal. And if it wasn't for this, they would have not been able to, probably would not have been able to conquer Ethiopia. Now, in 1936, Hitler reoccupied what's known as the Rhineland, and they were not supposed, this was part of Germany, but part of the Treaty of Versailles was that Germany could never put troops into this area. And Germany did. What did the League of Nations do to this blatant disregard of provisions in the Treaty of Versailles? They didn't do anything. All right, just another example of appeasement.